So I am CEO of a small research and development company called NAND Technologies. We specialize in cellular networks, and I want to encourage everyone here to think about cellular networks and its impact on your communities and taking more control of it, potentially deploying it on your own. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a primer on cellular along the way and tell 3 quick stories. So many years ago, in the early 2000s, I was a senior executive at Accenture and got sick of making more wealthy corporations more wealthy. And the company had just started its first ever social corporate responsibility program. And I volunteered to be the first American to go work and spend about a year with CARE and Catholic Relief Services, the big NGOs. As part of that, I agreed to do exactly this kind of work, connectivity stuff. And on sort of the extreme end of the scale. So in the early 2000s, a small team from CARE, from the IT department, went back into Sierra Leone while the country was still de-arming to try to stand back up all the IT systems and internet connectivity for CARE, for food aid and relief and everything else. So we fly in on a charter flight, very similar to how we got here on BA. We land in Senegal, and then we fly over to Sierra Leone, and we do the combat landing where you spiral down for 45 minutes, and then you land. We land in the middle of the night, it's 2 a.m. We get on an ex-Soviet cargo helicopter to fly from the airport to the CARE compound, complete with patched bullet holes in it. And we work for a week. And during that week, we get everything restored. And the power grid is out, so CARE has its own solar bank and generator and battery bank and water purification system and IT systems and everything else. And at the end of the week, we were going to take the day off because we got done a little early. So we take the SUVs and we drive to this very famous beach in Sierra Leone that's just stunningly beautiful, that at that time was a resort that had been raided, burned out, and was in ruins. But amusingly, all of the beach chairs were still there. And so we're sitting around drinking beer in beach chairs around this ruined resort, and I pull out my cell phone, and I've got cell phone service. And so I normally talk to my best friend, who I've known since kindergarten. We grew up through high school, and we still go hunting together and stuff. And I start talking to him, and the call goes through, and it's kind of a usual daily call. I'm hearing about him complaining about his wife or whatever. And he says, "So when did you get back?" And I said, "What do you mean, when did I get back?" He said, "So I thought you were going to be in Africa." And I said, "Well, I'm in Africa on a beach in Sierra Leone." He's like, "What?" He's like, "This is the clearest call I've ever had." And it was at that point that I realized that I needed to learn a lot more about GSM and cellular connectivity, and that started me on the odyssey that sort of brought me here. So in the United States, we've had a bunch of different cellular technologies over the years. I am very much a proponent of the ones that came out of ETSI and 3GPP, which are typically known as 2G, 3G, and 4G. The first thing I would tell everyone is stop using those terms for 2 reasons. One, they're marketing terms, so they don't translate well from country to country. What we call 2G in the United States is called 2.75G in Europe. What we call 4G in the United States is called 3.75G in Europe. And so that makes for very confusing things. So try to learn the things. The second thing is people make the assumption that moving from 2G to 3G to 4G is like what you want to do. You want the latest thing. I would submit for many rural areas, indigenous connectivity, that's probably a very bad way to think about things. While I agree with what Matt said yesterday, if you're deploying internet connectivity, higher bandwidth pipes are definitely best. But if you're thinking about deploying cellular for a community for its own work, you've got a couple of other things to keep in mind, and one of those is physics. So when the original GSM spectrum was developed back in the early 1990s, the Earth had no cellular connectivity. So it was engineered for very dispersed towers covering very vast areas with low resource utilization and low power. Okay, you can run a GSM cell phone tower off of a single 60-watt solar panel in most of the world. Doing that with LTE takes a huge field of solar powers because LTE gobbles power. So it's not just that the old Nokia phones had a month of battery life. A big part of the reason for that is because they're GSM phones and not LTE phones. If you take your iPhone to Africa and you're on GSM, you'll find magically you get 4 days battery life because it's not gobbling all the power. So that's something else to think about. So a couple of quick stories on how this can have an impact. One is for subsistence fishermen in India. This is a very famous economic paper published in the MIT Economic Journal. In Kerala, which is, if you think of India, at the point on the west coast, that's the state of Kerala. Indigenous fishing is by far the most common subsistence there. Most people eat fish. It's their major source of protein in their diet. It's a very poor region, so there's very little refrigeration. So the fishermen go out, catch the fish, bring it back to the market, it's sold, people eat it that night. The problem with that is that when you go out 20 kilometers and you come back, you had your choice of which, as a fisherman, which market you're going to sell into, which one you're going to show up and sell your fish. If you get lucky, you're the only fisherman that shows up there and you get a very high price for your fish. But a lot of people go home hungry because they can't afford the fish. If you're unlucky and everybody shows up at that fish market, then the price of fish is very low and you end up dumping most of your catch back in the ocean. So you're overfishing. Through no planned effort from the government or any corporation, when cell phones were put in along the coast, the fishermen immediately started using them and SMSing back with watchmen on the shore, and they would find out how many people were in the markets and what the price of fish was. This immediately had three very positive impacts. One, the fish was better distributed, so everybody was getting a consistent price. The fishermen were maximizing their price, while at the same time the local people were paying the lowest price, and overfishing stopped. So it was a very positive impact on the community. It's a very famous paper. I would submit that there's probably many things like that that could happen in many indigenous communities around the world, and you should think about doing that. So, and I'll turn it back over.
Thank you. Next is